God himself has, so to speak, a right wing and a left wing, or a right aspect and a left aspect. And then they're filtered down into the world, and they come across in all levels of life, all the way down to politics. The thing what we want to open tonight is understanding, I call this the road to true peace, integrating the right and the left. One of the biggest problems facing the world today, it's within Judaism, and it's also within the United States, is polarization. The polarization, the feeling of disintegration, society disintegrating into camps, and the camps increasingly unable to communicate one with the other, almost as if they're living in different galaxies, and the galaxies are rapidly becoming more distant one from the other. And in science fiction, when the galaxies are getting far away one from the other, you have to build a wormhole, and like a secret tunnel that connects them, and it cuts through space and cuts through time, and it cuts through the moral and spiritual universes that the people in different camps inhabit. And that's what we need to do. And King David likened himself to a worm. And when he was studying Torah, it's often the Jews are likened to worms, because we're small, we're not powerful, and our power is in our mouth. A worm is just a mouth. He knows how to learn and how to daven, how to pray, and how to bless. And so we need to build wormholes between the galaxies, and we need to find a cure to polarization. How can we build bridges and make people understand one another, the right and the left? It's coming from Hashem, it's all coming from God, both the right and the left. And they all have elements of one larger truth. And understanding that's what we want to talk about tonight. But I want to start with something because we're just coming out of Purim, and we're still in the week of Purim. So I want to start with something from the Scroll of Esther, which I noticed this year, which very much connects the two things I just said, which is what's going on in Israel and this topic. And that is that the Scroll of Esther is very much an exile story. It starts and ends with the Jewish people under the rule of King Ahasuerus, and it's not a story of redemption. It's a story of redemption from a certain edict that was stamped and sealed that the Jews would be destroyed, and then they were saved. But it's almost like a footnote in history, because it's in Israel, everyone knows the terror bombings, but we don't remember. Who remembers the terror bombings that were avoided? Nobody remembers them. There are tons of them. There are hidden heroes who prevented a terror attack. Who knows about the terror attack? Nobody knows. That's what Purim is all about. Esther is this hidden. Esther comes from hiddenness. She was this undercover agent who prevented something. So, but the story is all about exile, and the name of God doesn't appear. It's the only book in the Bible that the name of God doesn't appear, which signifies again that everything is hidden. It's the last book of the Bible. It's the book that most resonates with us, because we live in an age without any revealed miracles, in which we don't experience God, just, the sky, the heavens opening up, and God descending, or a prophet coming, and it's more subtle. We hear little whispers that are whispering in the world, if you're sensitive, and many people aren't so sensitive, and they feel that it's all just nature and physics. And this is what the Scroll of Esther is. There is no revealed miracle. And what happens is that through the machinations of politics and seduction and coincidence, which is the divine providence, it all works out in the end. But there's a moment that's very, very powerful, and especially in times of war, that Haman, he received the ring of the king, and he used the ring with the seal to stamp this command, this edict, that says that on a certain date, there's going to be a Holocaust. All the nations can rise and kill Jews, and Jews have no right for self-defense. And everything is operating under this terrible fear. But then Esther is able to turn things around, and she does one banquet and another banquet, and everything works out. And then Ahasuerus comes to his senses. He realized that he's been manipulated by this terrible advisor, and that Esther, his beloved wife, the wife that he loves the most, is Jewish. Everything suddenly comes into place, and then he kills Haman, and he gives the house of Haman to Esther, gives it to Mordechai. But then he says something which, if you read it for the first time, it's like a shocking turn of event. He tells her, well, I can kill Haman, I did, I can give you his house, I can do whatever you want, up until the half of my kingdom I can give to you. But there's something I cannot do. I cannot repeal, I cannot cancel the edict. I'm not a supreme leader. I'm under, it's a constitutional monarchy, and I'm under the law also, and I can't change what was sealed with my ring. I can't change it, and the Holocaust is going to happen. And it's very much what we felt in Israel. We felt that the 7th of October was like everything was one big shock, but it's like the rot has been setting for years. We've seen the mistakes again and again, and inside, between Jews, fellow Jews, and in relation to Hamas and to the Palestinians. And now we're so used, in Chassidut, there are so many stories that you have this Rebbe, this tzaddik, and he's able to see with his spiritual eyes that there's a certain order in the sky, that something bad is coming, and Jews will be punished, and then he prays or he does something else, and he cancels it. And it's all canceled, and it just goes away. It didn't happen. And in Purim, that's not what happens. He tells her, and he's serious. He says, the date is still on, the Holocaust is going to happen, and I can't do anything about it. And the only thing you can do is take the same ring, and the word ring in Hebrew, tabat, is the same root as the word nature. So tabat is something round, the nature is round, teva is nature. Teva it's all about being imprinted. The laws of nature are imprinted in nature, just like the seal you imprint with the stamp. And so nature, the laws of nature are imprinted. This is the post-prophetic, post-miraculous age. Nature now rules. And we're not going to have a tzaddik that prays and then the terrible future event is going to be prevented. That's not what's going to happen. And that's very much the world we live in. It says what you can do now is you can take the ring and you can sign a new edict that Jews have a right to self-defense. And then there will be a war, and hopefully you'll win. That's what King Ahasuerus says. And so they sign a new declaration, and it's distributed everywhere. And nothing has changed. The non-Jews are still going to try and kill all the Jews, but now the Jews can gather communities and stand up to save themselves. Likahel ve'la'amod al nafsham. To come together and that's what happened. There's a war. There's a regular war, and the Jews win. So I found this very, very powerful to read and think about in this time. That we don't marry to live in an age in which we have sort of revealed miracles. What we do have is this power to come together, lehikahel, to form a community together, to be bonded, to connect, and then to stand up for our lives. And the other side of this is that there's also a lot of emunah here, a lot of faith, because God is in the background helping from within his hidden chambers. So these are the two sides. Now, one of the things that's going on, and this is leading up to the main topic, is that at some point, there's a tipping point. So when they start winning, then the other side is getting fearful. Instead of striking fear, now it's the opposite. And then there's a very special term, which is very vital for our times, but we need to fully understand it. It says that many of the non-Jews in that huge empire, it's 127 countries, started converting to Judaism. Why? Then it says, Ki nafal pachad Yehudim alehem, because the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So what does it mean, the fear of the Jews fell upon them? So I'm briefly going to give three explanations. This is an old idea from Rabbi Ginsburg, and it's just beautiful to come into our topic this evening. So the first explanation is the simplest one. Where the three levels, just so when we understand, we're talking about the level of the earthly level, the spiritual level, and the godly level. This in Chassidut is the main concept to understand of how the world is built. It's called olamot, worlds, that's the mundane level. Neshamot, souls, that's the spiritual level. And then elokut, godliness, which is the godly level. Many people have an appreciation of spirituality. Some people think only the physical world exists. And some other people appreciate that there's a spiritual dimension to the world. But then there's another leap of faith to be made, which is to the level of godliness. So we can, understand it mean that the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Each one totally different. So the first one is the simplest one. The Jews were powerful, were strong, and the other side realized they were losing, and they started being afraid. That's the simple reading. That's the literal reading. The Jews were becoming strong, and then they were afraid, and this is a good sign that we're winning the war. But then there are the two other spiritual levels, and here this is very, very interesting, what the Hasidic reading of this concept is. So on the level, the spiritual level, what does it mean that the fear of the Jews fell upon all the nations? The Jews have something called a fear of heaven. It's an awe of heaven. It's not a fear of punishment. It's a basic, very foundational feeling of wanting to do good, wanting to do what God wants. And it's the fear here, again, it's not a fear of punishment, it's a fear of not being connected to God. I want to do what God tells me to do, because if I don't do it, then we'll be estranged. So it's a fear of estrangement from God. And it's called Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven. It's having awe. There's love and there's awe, and the first thing is awe. You need awe, because then the love, it's not like your friend, it's not your pet. It's God, it's your Father in heaven. So first you need a kind of awe like you have towards a father. So the second reading, the second level here, is that the non-Jews started experiencing the Jewish Yirat Shamayim, the Jewish fear of heaven. Because when they saw the Jews winning and they saw everything being turned in such a miraculous way, then although again there was no revelation, there was no the 10 plagues or anything, or the splitting of the Red Sea, but they suddenly felt that there is a God, and God is with this people, and then the wisdom that they're having and their story, and is looking out for them, and in this incredible ways is turning things in their direction. And then they started having emunah, and the fear of God, the fear of heaven was contagious. So the first explanation is that they were afraid of us, that we're going to kill them, we're going to win the war. But the second is that they started learning from us. And maybe the Jews would teach them totally different understanding of what's going on in the Scroll of Esther. And then the final one, the final level, the godly level, is that the fear of the Jews is who the Jews fear, that is God Himself. It's a different understanding. The second level was just the feeling of fear of heaven. The feeling the Jews have, the fear of the Jews, is the fear of heaven that the Jew has in his heart. But the third reading is God fell upon them. The object of the Jews' fear, right? We can read these two words, Pachad HaYehudim, in all three ways. The Jews striking fear into people, the fear that Jews experience, and the one that Jews are fearful of, or again have this awe towards. So the third level is that they actually had a godly experience. They had a godly revelation, each one of them. And that all these helped them convert. They didn't only convert out of fear. If you only read the simple reading, you would think they're all converting out of fear. Don't kill me, I want to join your side because you're the winning side. But if you have those two other levels, you realize something totally different is going on. That the Jews, the spiritual wisdom of the Jews, and God Himself is now being revealed to other nations. So in this sense, this is a very, very messianic scroll. It's the most exile type scroll in halakha, in Jewish law. It says, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? And Chanukah we say Hallel. It's this series of psalms that we praise God with. But on Purim we don't. Why? Because it ends when we're still under Achashverosh's rule. And he's still giving taxes, and he's still drunk, and he's still doing whatever he wants. But so it's all exile, but it's also all redemption in some ways, because it's talking about a future in which the Jews are coming back to who they are, what they should be, and becoming and teaching. And whenever you teach, you also learn. So there's the returning light when Jews start teaching non-Jews then there will also be a reversal, because then the non-Jews will ask new questions and will come up with new ideas, and this amazing synergy that's going to come out of it. Even just the fact that Esther is a non-Jewish name for a Jewish woman. Her name is Hadassah, and she took up a Persian name, Esther. And the scroll is named after the Persian name. So all this was just getting warmed up to delve into what we really want to talk about, which is the concept of right and left, both in politics and in Kabbalah, and how they come together. And then try and demonstrate a little bit how we can integrate the truths of the right and the left. So we'll start by saying the following. So clearly, in order for us to be what we were meant to be, which is united and strong, and to be able to share this wisdom that we have with all the world, then we need to unite. In Israel, everything that happened was very clearly, and everyone feels this, it was a direct result of the inner split or chasm that was growing ever stronger day by day, and it reached its peak just a few days before Simchat Torah, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It was a really dark day of Jews. This wasn't a civil war, but it was a civil war in terms of the energy. The energy was almost like a civil war. And there were fights over praying at the holiest day. It was and I was in Tel Aviv. We just moved to Tel Aviv a month before, and we all felt it. And again, as I said, this is not only in Israel, because the United States is also becoming increasingly, it's becoming the DSA, the divided states of America, with this feeling that it's just, again, like I said, two moral universes, or two linguistic universes even, two totally different sets of values. So I think the Jews being united is the key to the world being united. I really think that in some way. But again, it's a synergy. So we need to think about how to unite the sides. Now, interestingly, ever since the French Revolution, the words that we're using to describe the political poles are right and left. So the political poles themselves have existed since time immemorial. And one of the most amazing facts about the human condition is that wherever you go, every country, every city, every party, every group, every classroom, you would have difference of opinions about everything. You would not find one issue anywhere in the world that you have full unanimous agreement upon. And even if you do, and then you go into the details, then you would see that the arguments would come up. It's a question of time. And, most of us don't know anything about the politics of, Indonesia. So, since Jesse came back from there. But I know for sure, without having Googled it, that Indonesia has a right and a left political parties. I have no idea what they say, but I know it exists, and I know it exists everywhere. And it's a little bit different, and it's evolving, and it's changing over time, but there's always some sort of left and some sort of right. And it was called by different names. And in Judaism, it was, the Bible it's all over the place. After King Solomon, the kingdom splits into two kingdoms. And one of them is in the north, and one of them is in the south. And this, by the way, is also, if you look at old maps, in the old maps, they're not oriented by the north, they're oriented by the Orient. That's why it's called oriented. They're oriented by the east. So that's what the word orientation, this orientation comes from. So the east is on the top of the map, and so the south is on the right, and the north is on the left. So the North Kingdom was the left-wingers, and the South Kingdom was the right-wingers. And it perfectly aligns, by the way, with the modern Jewish society, because the northern state was the more secular. So secular was more into
Tel Aviv.
It was like Tel Aviv. It was more universal. It was more influenced by the other nations. It didn't have the holy site. It wasn't the descendants of David and Solomon. So it was called Israel, and the kingdom of the south, which was the right, was called Judea, and so it was Jews and Israelis, like the same as today, and it's the right and the left. Although it's called the north and the south, but again, in old maps, it's the right and the left. So this is something very, very foundational. And of course, and people go into politics, and people have political opinions, and people try to ask themselves what they feel about each and every issue. And why? Why is it like that? Why is it always split? Why is it always, and it's different from country to country, but in both in Israel and in America, you really feel every time there's an election that it's so close, and you have the few states that are wavering, and you would think that each side is so convinced with what they have to say and their worldview that there should be some agreement by now, but apparently there isn't. It remains, swinging around the 50%. Now, this is something amazing to think about. And the faithful or Kabbalistic explanation is that this is really a political expression of two sides of the infinite truth and wisdom of God Himself. God Himself has, so to speak, a right wing and a left wing, or a right aspect and a left aspect. And then they're filtered down into the world, and they come across in all levels of life, all the way down to politics. And we have to adopt this kind of world, this kind of lens, to look at reality through this lens, and to understand that all these people with their terrible energy and the vibes, and each one, feeling absolutely sure that they hold on to the whole truth. And this is a distant echo of an inner dialogue within God that He's holding through us. And He's waiting patiently. He has infinite patience. He bears the world. This is one of the Kabbalistic expressions. He tolerates the world. It's called Sovel Kol Almin. He is the most tolerant, in this sense, is maybe a leftist. He tolerates the world. Well, it depends. When the left is tolerant, then it's left. Sometimes the right is more tolerant than the left. So anyway, God is infinitely tolerant, and He is waiting for us to, even if it's just one individual, to crack this code, that this left-right schism is something very profound that needs to be integrated. And until it is fully, deeply integrated, until you can feel within you that you can echo the kernel of truth in both sides, and you can feel that maybe even if the practical decision that you make regarding an issue only goes in one direction, but it's totally different if you vote for one party, but you have an understanding of the other party, where it's totally different, this experience, from voting to the same party, it's the same physical act, and looking with total disdain and alienation and feeling of total lack of understanding and sympathy and empathy towards the other note on the ballot. And I would, even in one time, there were elections, where we had a lot of elections in Israel in the past few years. And one time, Rabbi Ginsburg said that when you go behind the how do you call this? The curtain that you...
Curtain.
The partition. And it's not like in America, it's not two, it's like 3 dozens of notes that you have. That's another thing to talk about. Why is it like this in Israel? The people that needs to be the most united is the most divided into all these groups and subgroups, and they keep dividing and subdividing and merging. But then they form blocks, because again, it's the law of the right and the left. So he said, before you put the note, do an exercise. Don't take all your time in the world, because there are other people in waiting, but try and develop empathy to all the notes that you're not putting in there. And so you could be there all day, right? But maybe you should do it before you go in. But that was an amazing exercise to make. That you can't put the vote until you feel that you could have voted, a part of you, in some other format, in some other, route in life, you could have voted for each of the other ones also. So this is a very, very beautiful, amazing state of mind to be in, that we're a small group here, but we can change the world, right? We can all, every time people come together, they can change the world. That's how we should look at the world. So we need to think about it in this way. So we need to unite, and we need to understand the right and the left in a good way, and we need to understand that it's all coming from God. Now, two stories. One story is about the Rebbe Rayatz. The Rebbe Rayatz was the previous Rebbe of Chabad. Everyone knows the last Rebbe of Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, famous Rebbe. He was the seventh and last in line. And then before him was his father-in-law, the Rebbe Rayatz. So the Rebbe Rayatz was, in the beginning of the 20th century, he was the Rebbe, and for the first half of it. And so the story goes that he was once on a train. And there were two Jews there who weren't religious, and they were arguing about a certain political or economic, it doesn't say, topic, and each one was trying to convince the other that the Torah is on his side, that what the Torah thinks, that Judaism is right wing or Judaism is left wing. Each one was giving evidence to prove. Now it's almost obvious that it was capitalism versus communism. That was what's going on at the time. It's still going on in some way. Nobody says communism today, it's socialism, but it's, which is like the diluted version of it maybe. But anyway, it's very clear that that's what they were talking about if you just know the time. And each one was was showing the verses that prove that the Torah is very capitalist or the Torah was very socialist or communist. And then they asked him, you're a rabbi, and what do you think? And then he told them, the Torah is not an ism. The Torah is above all isms, and it's the root of all isms. And so you're both right, and we need to figure out, by learning the Torah, you come out of this mindset of either or, and you still have a big question ahead of you, which is how do you integrate them? That's a big, big question. Just saying, oh, both have an element of truth to them, that's very easy, and it doesn't mean anything. And you can't really do anything about it. You have to say, well, which one is more true now, or which one comes first, and which one comes next, and which one is the first level, which one is the second level, and how do they come together, right? These are the big questions. But just as a general guidance, he told them, the Torah is above all isms, it's the root of all isms, and both the ideologies that you're talking about are rooted in the Torah. Now you have to find the root, and then just as the verses you both came up with, they stand next to each other, then so do the roots of these two ideologies. And that helps you transcend the ideology. Because if you're in this ideological bubble or box, then this is like a kind of idol worship. You're boxed up, you can't hear anything else. And then, we psychologists know this today, you have this kind of biased, everything you read is biased. You're looking for things to confirm, you're ignoring whatever threatens your belief, and this is how polarization happens. And with the internet now, it was supposed to herald this age of communication, and everyone learning about, and it did a little bit, because now you are able to be exposed. If you live in a community before the internet, you would maybe only hear what other people think. Now you're more exposed. But the way the algorithm works is that you're mostly surrounded, once again, by what you want to be surrounded in.
Echo chambers.
Yeah, that's the echo chambers. So that's the one story. The other story is a fictional story. It's one of the stories of the rabbis of Chelem, right? So Chelem, of course, is the city where all the wisest rabbis lived, or the wisest in their own eyes. And very funny stories, but each one of them is very profound. When you really, one day my dream is to go over the stories and learn Chassidut from these stories. So here's one example. So the rabbi of Chelem was sitting in his house, and two people came, and they had this massive argument that one was cheated the other, and now he owes him a lot of money, and the other one says, no, you cheated me, and you cheated me, and I don't know anything, you owe me something, whatever. And they were arguing, so the rabbi said, come down, I want to hear you both. And so you go first, and he starts. We did this, we did that, and we argued, and he promised, and he didn't. Say what? And the rabbi listens and says, you know what? You're right. You're right. I totally, everything you said is right, but let's hear the other one. So then the other one, because everything he said was a lie. It's totally opposite. And it was this, and he did, and he's lied, and this. And then the rabbi listens and says, you know what? It's amazing. You're right. You're 100% right. So then the wife, who's just, walking sort of in the listening, is overhearing the conversation, and then she goes to her husband and she says, you can't say you're right and you're right. It doesn't make any sense. You're the rabbi. You have to tell them which one is really right, and you have to be a posek. You have to you're the rabbi. You're right, you're right. So he listens to his wife and he says, you know what, you're right. And so this is the story. Now it's a funny story, but it's a very, very deep story. It's a very Jewish story. There's a verse that says, tzedek, tzedek tirdof. You shall pursue justice. So, and it says, pursue justice, justice. Or justice, justice, you shall pursue. And so you would think it's just like, you should go on pursuing justice all the time, very strongly, very emphatically, justice, justice, I will pursue. But in the Torah, it doesn't work this way. You can emphasize the things in different ways. If a word appears twice, it has to mean something. So one of the explanations is that the word tzedek itself, the first two letters are tzad. Tzad is a side. And then kuf is, the numerical value of kuf is 100. So tzedek is, each side is 100% right. Or at least they feel that they're 100% right. And there's a 200% truth here in some way. So tzedek tirdof is there are two sides to justice. True justice is two-sided always. And the true judge has to really listen to each side, who's absolutely convinced they're 100% right, and hear the justice, the aspect of justice that they have, and he needs to pursue it, to chase it. This is the term, tirdof, to chase the justice. So he needs to go deep into one direction, deep into the other direction. He has to feel that both sides of the truth. But then, of course, the wife is the wisest of them all, and she tells, because she's grounded. She says, in the world of ideas and concepts, it's like the saying about Shammai and Hillel, that in heavens they're both absolutely true. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these are the words of the living God, although they're absolutely contradictory in each and every issue. But God is infinite, his infinite sides, facets to his diamond. The diamond of truth is infinitely faceted. So they're both true, but down here, and that's where the wife is coming in, because she's grounded, and she says, you need to pick a side. You need to choose where you go. And you need to say that, and even if you compromise, you need to find out the way to compromise. Either way, you can't just remain in this level of everyone's right. And she's also right, and she's the most right, because she's the one. Now you have to take this complex, multi-sided truth, and you have to bring it down into the world. So all this is leading us into asking, so what does it mean that God himself has a right side and a left side? So this is where Kabbalah comes into the picture. So in Kabbalah, the most basic model that we're all using is the model of the Sefirot. The model of the Sefirot is the structure or the pattern of divine channels of energy and light through which God created the world and is continuously recreating or giving energy into the world. And it's very mystical sounding, but it can also be very non-mystical. It's up to you of how you read it and how you implement it. And it can be very psychological, not spiritual. It can be just the map of your own soul, and it can be the map of any dynamic in the world. And that's one of the major things that Rabbi Ginsburg is doing, is using this model and other adjacent models to treat every topic in the world, whether it's Torah or a world topic, a worldly topic. And what's going on in this pattern, by the way, the book that's out now, the Becoming One, really has a dual purpose. Its one purpose is to talk about relationships and the stages of relationships growth. That's what the book is about, is how, according to the Sefirot, what are the stages of love's growth. But it has another purpose, and the other purpose is just to teach the Sefirot. It's an introduction to the Sefirot through the topic that everyone loves, which is relationships. So it's really both. So the way the Sefirot are built is that it starts with one Sefirah called the crown, and the crown is just sort of merged with godliness. It's a big question even whether it's a Sefirah or it's part of God. Sefirah is like part of the created world. But then immediately afterwards, the next two Sefirot, it splits into right and left. So there's a right and a left axes. There's a right axis and the left axis, and the central axis. And the dynamic that's repeating itself 3 times, It's a dynamic of right and left, and then you go down and you find a central synthesis or a converging point or compromise or mediating point. There's all kinds of ways of thinking about this that somehow integrate the two sides. And then it repeats again and again. Because every time, it's on a cognitive level, an emotional level, on a behavioral level, you have to be connected to the right aspect of your own being and the right aspect of the truth and the left aspect of the truth. And all this is part of God. This, in the picture of the Sefirot, this is like the Kabbalistic answer to the question, what does it mean that man was created in the image of God? The image of God is this weird structure or model, and this becomes the skeleton of human beings physically and spiritually, and everything that we're doing in the world. Now, okay, so there's right and left in Kabbalah, and there's right and left in politics, but who says they can be, you can even learn from one to the other? So where did the right and the left come from? So they came from the French Revolution. And it was apparently, you would think, totally arbitrary. And you can imagine a world in which everything that we call the right, the Republicans would be called in a parallel universe, in the multiverse. In the multiverse, there's a universe in which the Republicans are called the leftists, and the Democrats are called the rightists. And it's the same world. That's the same world. Maybe a few puns here and there you can't make. You have to reverse them. That's it. And that maybe the design of some flyers, whatever, would be different, but it's the same thing. But the colors could be different. It doesn't matter. So, but it just so happened that in the General Assembly of the French Revolution, then there were two sides, and on the right side were the loyalists to the ancient regime, the kings and the nobility, and they wanted to conserve as much as possible of the old regime, post-revolution. And on the left were the revolutionaries, who wanted to change as much as they could. And they wanted to turn everything upside down. And they didn't want to preserve anything or conserve anything. And so, to this day, the right-wingers are the conservative ones. And they want to conserve and they want to keep things as they are, or they're more careful about changing, and they're anti-revolutionary and they don't like the word revolution. And the left they like the word revolution. It's a nice sounding word for them, because they're unhappy with the way things are, and they want to change things, and they want new and exciting and different, and they want more equality and less hierarchy. And so the question is now, was this a coincidence? Or was this somehow divinely chosen? Or if we can imagine this multiverse, this parallel universe in which it's the other way around, are we in the right universe and the wrong universe? So according to Kabbalah, we're in the right universe. And it was no coincidence that it just so happened that the loyalists to the ancient regime were on the right and the revolutionists were on the left. It was aligned with the Kabbalistic notions of right and left. And by the way, the other universe, that it's the Republicans are called, it's just disappeared, just twinkled out of existence right now, because we just proved that we're in the right universe. So the idea is that the concept of right and left are more profound. According to Kabbalah, they have a profound meaning to them. So what do they mean? So the right axis in the Sefirot is the axis that wants to bring down the divine light as it is in heaven and sort of loyally represented it, bring it into the world. A right-winger in total spiritual Kabbalistic sense is someone who is in his energy, or the channel that he's on is a top-down channel. He wants to bring divine light into the world. How does this go along with the right almost everywhere in the world? It's because the right almost everywhere in the world is more pro-religious and pro-preserving ancient wisdom, which is always, again, religious, whether Christian, whether Jewish, whether Muslim, whether anything else. The rightists are always more traditional, and they're conservative. They want to conserve, and even if they're secular, they respect religion more than the people on the left. They would say, I don't believe, but I do think that there's weight and there should be respect to ancient wisdom, whatever. So in this sense, they're going with this attempt to bring divine light into the world. And they're coming with ideals that they want to then bring into the world, and they're facing the world, and they're part of this energy. But the left is, what is the left all about? In the Sefirot, you have God is revealing himself to the world. He's giving the Torah. He's sending his words to the prophets. He is sending down wisdom into the world. But all this is just the right axis. What is the left axis all about? Why is the Sefirot diagram not just a linear diagram like in the East you have the chakras diagram, and in Neoplatonism, other traditions, it's all just one series of spiritual levels. But in Kabbalah, it's split into this three with the dynamics. So the one that corresponds to the other systems is the right axis, because that's the one that's going from top to bottom with the very clear. But then you have the left axis. The left axis is all about countering the right with questions and dilemmas and emotions and problems that arise from reality, and they challenge the divine light. Once God creates the world, he's creating another being, and this other being, in Hebrew we say he's not a friar. He doesn't.
He's not a sucker.
He's not a sucker. Exactly. He's not a sucker. The world is not a sucker. The world is very physical, and created beings have their own volition, and then they can start arguing with God, and they start ignoring God, or they start shouting at God, and they start asking God questions, and all this is embodied in the left axis. So the left axis is all about. So we'll just give an example. So there's on the right axis, on the highest level, you have wisdom on the right and understanding on the left. In Hebrew, it's chokhmah and bina. Wisdom and understanding. So wisdom is divine wisdom, right? It's like the word wisdom, it's divine wisdom. And so like a prophet speaks, he comes and he speaks. And then the student comes and says, yeah, well, what do you mean? And what do you do in this case? What do you do in that case? Or I disagree with you, or that's nonsense. And this is understanding. Understanding wants to understand what wisdom is saying. And it does so by provoking it, by asking questions, by analyzing it, by breaking it into pieces, and then putting it back together. And it's like, it's sometimes likened to, the wisdom is like a seed, and understanding is like a womb. It's like the egg, the ovum, and the womb that takes the seed and unfolds it and takes everything, and it does so by differentiating all the elements that are there and then integrating them again.
Feminine.
Yeah, that's the feminine, yeah. And then you have knowledge, which is wisdom and understanding coming together. And the idea is that every time you have, so the right is coming with wisdom and the left is coming with the wanting to understand by asking questions and poking and provoking everything that the right is saying. And if they don't divorce, if they're able to communicate, then something new emerges, which is called dat, which is below them, but also between them. And incredibly enough, the dat is aligned directly below the keter, which is the original supernal divine unity that both wisdom and understanding originate from. And so only when they integrate, then the keter above is sort of smiling, or it's glowing. And it's like another droplet of crown light has come into the world through this integration of the right and the left. And the left in politics is doing exactly what the left in Kabbalah is doing. It's challenging traditions. And it's coming up with new topics and new issues and new problems. And it's also more about the individual. It says, well, you have this beautiful ideology and it's all about the state or the nation or the people or the group or the religion. But what about that individual? He can't stand that, or he doesn't work for him. And then you have the poor people, and you have the gay people, and you have all this, and then all these challenges that are coming with little details and things. It's very annoying to the right-wing person, because he wants to have this beautiful structure, eternal truth come into the world, and then he's provoked by all these questions, And of course they dislike each other equally. But they have to like each other because each one is very important to the other one. The left without the right is lost in what happens. So again, the right is coming from above to below, and the left is coming from below to above. So the left is the right is coming from above to below. He's starting out with, I have this religion, I have this Torah, I have these ideals, and I want to bring them into the world. I come to preach to the world the wisdom that I have. And the left is not coming, it doesn't assume to have any kind of absolute, supernal, eternal, spiritual wisdom or truth. It just looks at the world and feels what the world feels and what it wants, and it expresses it in a very authentic and again, it's a bottom-up way. And it says, this is what I want, this is what I demand, this is what I think. And so again, it's really like they're both extremely important one to the other, but each one of them, when they want to have this egoistical tendency to turn their backs on the other, and says, oh, he's coming with all his ideals and all his truth and all this. Who says who? I don't care about that, and I just want to build a world in which we can all get along in this world without any assumptions about any kind of tradition, and I want to do away with traditions and I want to do away with everything. That's the left, because it's coming from the ground
Imagine of the Beatles. Imagine.
Yeah, John Lennon's Imagine. That's one variation of it. And let's just get rid of it. The communists had the same thing in their song. They had it like this: just destroy the old world, and the French Revolution. And they're impatient. We'll talk about it in a second. There's something about the left that's impatient. But just to get an understanding about these two lines, this is a totally Kabbalistic model that has it predates the French Revolution and the concepts of right and left in politics. When the French Revolution happened and the assembly was built the way it was built, and the words, the political right and the political left came into the world, they were following or enacting or showing into the world this very, very ancient Kabbalistic model that talks about how the dynamic within God works and within the world works. So it's just amazing just to see this and the way it works. And to really, and now of course you have to peel away the political talk and the political energy, and you have to boil it down to what is the Republican saying, what's motivating him? What is he trying to say? And what is the liberal trying to say, really, the Democrat? What is he really saying? And what's consistent, because it's changing. Every 10 years, it's different topics every year. And but you have to boil it down and try to get to the essence of what they're saying, and then you can feel that they're expressing something very, very real. And you want to try and integrate them. So, okay, so now I said before, it's very easy to say, well, there's a truth to both sides, and let's just integrate them, and let's all try to get along. And there's a song, people are people, so why should it be that you and I should get along so awfully? So that's very romantic, very childish. And kids think like, right, when kids see the adults arguing, says, just stop arguing, and just agree, or just... And it's very naive, and the more you grow up and the more you realize that the political topics people are arguing about are indeed very, very complicated. So we need a guideline as to how it can be integrated. It's easy to say either or is simplistic, and we need to go for both. But then a new question arises, which is how, in what order, in what way, and how do we integrate them? So I'm going to give one basic rule, and then I'm going to demonstrate this whole thing with one particular topic. So the rule is called, this is a Kabbalistic, again, we're going back to Kabbalah. It's a Kabbalistic expression, but you can see that it works out beautifully. And the expression is called le'achlala smola beyemina, to inter-include or contain the left within the right. So not everyone likes the sound of that. But this is a very ancient basic term, and it also has a halachic expression that if you read the Rambam, the way the Rambam describes how someone should be davening, when they daven, they should put the right hand over their left hand when they're davening. That's what it says. So the left hand, both hands are involved, but it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's this. And so why is it this way? He doesn't give an explanation. But the explanation is Kabbalistic. The explanation is that there's something about the right that needs to envelop the left, and the left needs to maybe more be within the right in some way. Again, before politics, just Kabbalistically. And one explanation is that there are several levels to what the right and the left means. One of them is that left is all about might. Might has to do with boundaries and distance and division. And right is all about love. So it's love and fear, or love and might.
Kindness.
And loving kindness, chesed, it's about coming together. And when you come into the world, then you take the element of might and you need to cover it up with chesed. It's like a glove, that's like a silk glove. And beneath the silk glove, you also have a fist maybe, or you have something that has power to it. It's not all silk. But it all has to be wrapped up in something smoother and more and kinder. But what does it mean when we try to translate this into politics? So basically what it means is that it appears that we need to take the right as an initial model and then take elements of the left, or what the left is trying to say, and integrate that into the right. It basically means you need to be a right-winger before you're a left-winger. The way you want to solve a problem is that often, not always, there's always exceptions to every rule, right? But as a general rule of thumb, to solve a problem, you would first need to go in the route of the right, but you mustn't stay there. You mustn't get stuck there. At some point, if you want to integrate the right and the left, if you want to be partisan and you want to all your life to mock the other side, then don't do this. But if you want to transcend this polarization dynamic and reverse it, then you would have to integrate the other side. So for the right winger, this is maybe easier, because start out by doing what you're doing, but then you have to add the left winger's element of what they're saying into your worldview, and it has to change when you do that. For the left winger, obviously it's harder to do, because they're impatient about trying to have things their way. But so again, would raise a lot of questions, but this is just a general understanding. But let me give you an example from within Judaism, something very amazing. So I talk about Kabbalah, but a main word that we use more than Kabbalah is Chassidut. Why? Because Kabbalah is very high and very dense and very complicated and very, very, very out there. But Chassidut is very grounded. Chassidut is Kabbalah for the people. It's spirituality based on Kabbalistic concepts, but in a way that everyone can relate to. And even when I talk about Kabbalah, really what I'm talking about is Chassidut. I'm just using Kabbalistic terminology because that's what it's based on. But the way, everything that we do in Chabad, Rabbi Ginsburg, other Chassiduyot, it's all about taking the Kabbalistic language and translating it into practical and spiritual, psychological language. And so when Chassidut came along, and there were a lot of arguments whether this was a kosher movement or an unkosher movement. And all the Litvish Jews in Eastern Europe, they were very much against Chassidut, very well known. They were called the Misnagdim or the Mitnagdim, those who opposed Chassidut. Why did they oppose it? Because they were afraid it's going to be like Shabtai Tzvi, which was a false messiah, who was a false messiah. And he wanted to take the Kabbalah and use it as an excuse to break halakha, to break the Jewish law, and ultimately people would do whatever they want. And there was another one after him, and they were becoming more and more conservative. So the Litvish people were just like conservatives. They were very, very conservative Jews, not in the sense of we have today, the religious denomination, which is very liberal. But the conservative, literally conservative, they were very right-wing, they were very, don't make any changes to the Torah, changes are dangerous, and we need to stick to what our parents did and our grandparents did, and that's how we have to go. And they stressed everything that the right stresses to this day. They stressed hierarchy. You have the wise people, and then you have the people who are not so wise. The wise people study in the yeshiva, those who are not so wise, they work, and there's a big difference between them. And it went in the inside also. You have the head rules over the heart should listen to the head should dictate to the heart what to feel, what to not feel. And it was very so hierarchical and conservative. Chassidut was a left-wing movement. That's the only way to describe it. No other way. It was a left-wing revolution. Why? Because that's what it was. If you zoom in, we said there's right and left there everywhere. If you zoom into Eastern Europe, 18th century, and you look at the Baal Shem Tov, and you go and you take a Wikipedia page, what are the differences, universal, eternal differences between right and left? And you go over the list, not all of them, but almost all of them, then you would check whether you would ask the Baal Shem Tov, what do you think about this and that? The word revolution, is it good or bad? And then what the Baal Shem Tov would say, yes, I want to do a revolution. Chassid is a revolution, so check, it's a revolution, it's leftist. Are you more hierarchical or more egalitarian? What would the Baal Shem Tov say? Or egalitarian, check. He would say that he would send the wise people to learn from the simple Jew. I wanted to go and learn that the way he doesn't know the alphabet, but he can whistle, and his whistle is even higher than all the wisest prayers that you have. His whistle is, oh wow, amazing whistle. It goes up, the cock-a-doodle-doo that he does, it's all the way to heaven. It pierces all the heavens. And it was the equivalent of the French Revolution. The Hasidic Revolution was the equivalent of the French Revolution in many ways. It spoke for the little man, it spoke for the simple Jew. And you would ask him, the head or the heart, the inner hierarchy? What's more important? He would say, the heart. The Zohar says so. The heart is more important, the inner dimension of the heart. Everything has to do with the heart. This is why the simple Jew is maybe more connected than the wisest Jew. And what else can you do? There was something anarchist. There was something subversive. There was something, almost everything you would think about the left was there in Chassidut. With one big difference. That really what the Baal Shem Tov did was that he integrated all these new lights and all these revolutions and all this energy into the age-old, classical, unchanging structures of traditional Judaism.
Vessels.
He did not erase a single iota of Jewish law, and he wanted to prove that he's not like Shabtai Tzvi. He is the rectification of Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was really an anarchist. That's very bad. And he said, I'm both a revolutionary and the conservative. If you would look at what he stressed were the more, again, so-called leftist values. But the whole point was that he put it all these lights into the classical Litvish vessels. And, for many years, when we had some people had Macintosh, some people have PCs. But those who had PC, you would start the computer, and first you would see this old operating system. It's called DOS, right? Disk operating system. It was very linear, very textual, it wasn't graphic. And it would blink there for a few moments, and then it would disappear under this new Windows type operating system that would copy Macintosh. And of course, Macintosh is the same, because the computer doesn't work in parallel. It doesn't really have Windows. I had to break it to you, but it doesn't really have Windows. It's linear. The computer does one thing at a time. So beneath the Windows, it's all linear and structured. But in the screen, you have a lot of windows, things going on at the same time. So basically, these two levels are just what the Baal Shem Tov was. The basic level, in Hebrew, DOS, right? The old disk operating system is DOS. DOS is just being
Dati,
just DOS, being Dati. DOS, regular Dati, Litvish Dati, just the DOS. Just you follow the Shulchan Aruch. You're just a dos, just linear commandment, textual. No windows. Don't open several windows at a time. I'm going crazy with your windows. Just tell me what to do and I do it. I open the Shulchan Aruch. This I do now. I do this. I do this. Okay. But then this is just one level. So the Baal Shem Tov was like the Bill Gates of Judaism. He said, yes, but all this is just the basic. But then you have all this spiritual world, and it's all opening up, and you can have several windows open up at the same time. And here you can have the wise Jew and the simple Jew, and they're all together, and you can move things from this window to the other window and the other way around. And amazing things happen when you have this things going on between them. And so you're a dos first. DOS is okay, but then you have to open all the windows. And so the Baal Shem Tov was really a model for. And what was he first? Was he first a Chassid or first a simple Jew following the law? So it was always the simple thing, the basic thing, is to have fear of God and to have. To try and to want to do what God tells you, and to be very solid and not break this. And then, using into this vessel, you can put all the infinite lights of God. The Kabbalistic terms for this is called that all these lights without the vessels are called lights of tohu, lights of chaos. It's not a bad word; it's a good word. Chaos is when they break the vessels, then literal negative chaos ensues. But Tohu is not chaos. Tohu is just this amazing, wondrous lights. But you also need vessels of rectification. And then you can integrate them. You can put the lights of Tohu or the lights of chaos into the vessels of Tikkun. So the idea was that the Litvish world, the pre-Hasidic world, was a rectified world. Everything was rectified. People were the word rectify comes from right. It's the same word, right? You're right. The G and the C, it's the same etymology. Rectified means to do it right, to be a right winger. So you do it right, and that's what keeps society going. But then you have to take the lights of chaos, which is coming from the left of these lights of chaos, and they wanted to put it into the vessels of rectification. So you see that in a way, by the way, I said you have to be a right winger first and the left winger afterwards, but that's only practically. Spiritually, it's the other way around. Spiritually, first you have to. That's very interesting. If you want to build a world, if you want to address a certain dilemma, like the border with the Mexicans, so what is the right thing? The right thing, we have to keep our borders. We can't have immigrants coming in, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're taking away jobs for the citizens and so on. And what is the left thing? The left is saying, but we have to care about them. They're poor people. We can't just abandon them. We can't just leave them and not care about them. It's all coming out of care. And you would have to say, okay, so let's do it one stage at a time. First we have to keep the border, and then we can see how we take care of those who came in already. Do we push them away? Do we help them? But first, there are stages and levels. First you have to be right, and then you have to be left. But if you're thinking spiritually or emotionally, it's the other way around. Because in Kabbalah, the lights of Tohu come before the vessels of Tikkun. First you have the world of chaos. It came before the world of Tikkun. But it broke the vessels. Because when you try to implement it physically, it doesn't work. But God made it so that it came first. The lights of Tohu, the left wing lights, were there before. But if you try to implement them here, where do you see this? In Esau and Jacob. Esau and Jacob are the epitome of the world of chaos and the world of rectification. Who was born first? Esau. But was he the chosen one? Was he the one to carry along the torch of Abraham and Isaac? No. Because he became bad. It didn't work out. He became something wild. Didn't work out. But he was born first. So it means that spiritually, your heart has to be in the way with the left. You have to identify with the left. But that's all on the spiritual level. On the physical level, you have to go to the right, and the blessings go to Jacob before they go to Esau, and then Esau would get his blessings. And in the future, Jacob would mature and include the lights of Esau within him. That's when Jacob becomes Israel, is when he is able to integrate the lights of Esau into into his own vessels. Yeah. So this is the basic model. And now, what time is it?
9:32.
9:32. So there's a lot more going on here that I see I'm not going to be able to go into. Yeah, of course, and we want questions also. So I'm going to skip one big thing, but I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll skip to the example, and then we'll open it up to questions. So one of the descriptions for the left and the right axis in Kabbalah is very weird. It says that the right line is long and the left line is short. And why is it weird? Because they're exactly the same length. So it's clearly that this is not like an external property, it's an inner quality that they have. It's a qualitative, not a quantitative or a measurable property. It's short and long in some inner way. And so what does it mean that there are quite a few explanations, but one of them is when the Hebrew words, one of the Hebrew terms for patient and impatient is patient is someone with length of spirit. He has orech ruach. He can breathe in and out. He has patience. So he has long breaths. And the impatient one is breathless. He's taking short breath. He is short of breath. That's the impatient one. He has kotzer ruach. And in modern Hebrew also you would use both terms. So the idea is that because the right, and you can see this in politics, the right side of the map is thinking in centuries, in millennia sometimes, definitely in years or decades. Why? It's conserving a long past, so it's thinking in the long run into the future. That's why it has better vessels if you want to build a sustainable society with the future. You have to start, again, in each issue, it's very good to see what the right is saying, because often they have more wisdom as to how things should work. They're more, in an interesting way, more realistic.
Practical.
Now, we said before that the right is coming from the top down, so it's grounded in something spiritual, and it comes down. How come it's more realistic? How come it's more patient? It goes absolutely together. Because they're coming from the top down, their eyes are directed at the world and they see the world more soberly. The right is almost always more sober regarding what's going on into the world. It's more suspicious of people, and there's reason to be suspicious of many people. As much as we want to believe in all people, there are bad people in the world. And the right is very acutely aware of the fact that some people are bad. And you have to be very, very wary of them. It's more realistic and therefore also sometimes more pessimistic. Pessimism is a result of being overly realistic. And why? Because it's coming from something that's a wisdom that's been built over many, many generations, and it's holding on to that wisdom. Part of that wisdom that has tested itself over time is to be very, very careful with this word, not to be naive about other people and about other countries and about human nature. And you know that you have to work with incentives. You can't just rely on the goodwill of everyone, including your own goodwill. You even have to be suspicious of your own self. And you have to work around your nature, your flawed nature. So it's coming from this higher spiritual wisdom, but it's looking down at the world and it sees the world soberly. The left, everything is the opposite. The left, it's coming from this world. It represents this world. It's more materialistic. It thinks about what this world is all about. It doesn't care about the world to come or spiritual values. It wants us to get along in this world, to build something that it would contain everyone. It's it appears to be very grounded. But because of this vantage point, it has a tendency to cling on to idealistic truths that are changing from generation to generation that are totally impractical. And it would cling into an ideology, communism. Let's do away with all the ma'amadot, all the classes, the economic classes. We'll wipe them all away. We'll do equality. Wow, amazing. We'll say that gender is totally constructed. Let's go with this. It becomes this ideology, and it's not grounded in anything, because when you're in the ground, you can't see the ground. What do you see? You see an ideal in a cloud here, and then a cloud there, and another cloud over there. And that's what you see when you're coming from the bottom up. And then you're very impatient about rushing the world into that, right? Peace now. Mm-hmm. I want peace. I want everyone to get along. I want to forget that we're different nations, different religions. Religions are a thing of the past. Let's sign a few treaties and have peace in the Middle East, and then we'll have global peace the year after that. Next year we're doing peace in the Middle East, and the year after that, first we take Manhattan, then we take Gaza, then we take, and we'll have world peace, and then they're starting to rush it into this new utopia that they have. They're more utopians, and they're impatient about this. And the right has more patience, but it's also more sober. It goes together. It's very beautiful the way it works. Okay, so again, there are a lot of directions I can take this with, but I want to focus on one little thing here, and I'll say how the way it works in Israel, but I'll also say the way how it works a little bit in America also. When you think about people thinking about other people, when you think about other people, then there was a term that Buber didn't grow within Chassidut. He discovered Chassidut. He was this unique character who was from Western Europe, but then he discovered Chassidut. And then he had this expression that he used. It's called the it and the thou. It says when you come across a person or even a flower, you can treat it as an it, as an object, basically, or you can treat it as a thou, which is as a subject. You can treat someone as someone who has an inner world and of meaning that you want to discover, and then you address them as a thou, as a you. Or you can look at them with estrangement, and you can think about them as someone else again. And the philosophical terms are object and subject. And he used it and thou. And in Hebrew, we say acher and zulat. Zulat is like the thou. Zulat is someone that you see their face and you're communicating with them, you care about them, and you want to have a dialogue with them. Whereas acher is the other. That's what the people in the academic world, they like talking about the other, the otherness, the othering. So the other is someone you don't care about, and you don't want to care about them. You want them to be the other. And in Hebrew, the word acher comes to the word achor. You want to see their backside. You don't want to see their face. It's like their face would demand that you would have a dialogue with them. You don't want to have a dialogue with them. You want to see them as if you want to turn your back to them. You want them to turn their back to you. That's the other. So it's zulat and it's acher. Now let's look at Israeli politics. We can also translate this into left and right in America, but let's start with Israeli politics. You think about the left. Each one, the left and the right, they have a zulat, a thou, a subject, and the other person who is a subject, and they also have an acher, the other person who's the other. They don't want any real connection with. So for the left, who is the thou? Who is the zulat? The subjective other, the one that you want a connection with. So for the left in Israel, it's very clearly, it's the non-Jew. The non-Jew is, you don't want to be nationalistic, you want to be universal. You don't want to be only in touch with your own, you want to be connected to world culture and be a man of the world, a person of the world. And more specifically, it's the Arab neighbor. There are Arabs in Israel, there are Arabs outside of Israel, the Palestinians. And for the left, you want to reach out to them, you want to go to the conventions with them, you want to show them that you're not a racist. You want to prove to them that you're not a racist. And you prove it by humanizing them and seeing their humanity and insisting on their humanity and insisting and believing and trying very hard to see their humanity beyond the maybe racist bias you may have growing up in the Middle East. You try to transcend it. And that's the subjective other, the zulat, the thou. But the left, the idealistic left, the hardcore, right? They also have an other, the negative other, the objective other. Who is that? That's the traditional Jew. It's the one, the religious Jew, the right-wing Jew. And there's even an expression, it's called the second Israel. The second Israel is everything, is the Israel the elite doesn't know exist.
Recognize or acknowledge.
Yeah, and mostly it's about religion. It's the right winger, it's the settler, it's the one who's maybe shouting something against the Arabs whenever there's a bombing, and you're disgusted by them. You don't want to talk to them. You see them as racist. Right now it's Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. Next year it's going to be someone else. It doesn't matter. And they're the ones that as a left winger, you don't like them. And I can testify that when I was younger, I would go to conventions to meet Palestinians, but I wouldn't talk to settlers, to Jewish settlers.
Wow.
That's how I grew up. As no, you're to blame that there's no peace in the Middle East. I don't want to talk to you. It's because of the settlements. It's because that you're insisting on this nationalistic ideals. And if you would only be left-winged like me, we would have peace in the Middle East, and you can go ahead with Oslo, and everything would be the utopia. Mm-hmm. And that's how it is. Now, very interestingly, let's stop, pause a little bit. It's very similar in the left, the academic left, and generally the left in America also. Their thou is the non-white, now it's the straight white male, that's how it's called. So everything that's not the straight white male, everyone who's not straight, everyone who's not male, everyone who's not white, that's the people that they want to project all their love and empathy and to show that they're not dehumanizing you and they are humanizing you and they see you, and it would go out of their way to show, to transcend their white guilt that they're above this. But who do they hate and they dehumanize and they can't stand and they won't talk to them and they think they're racist and bigoted and phobic and whatever? It's the right wingers, the Republicans. It's the privileged. It's the white person. It's also them a little bit, right? It's Western culture right now. That's what they can't stand and they feel ashamed that they belong to it. So it's very similar. Now, if you now go back to Israel, to Judaism, the right, the religious right, they also have a thou and an other, a subjective other and an objective other. And who is their zulat, their thou? We'll go the other direction. Who is their other, their negative other? It's the enemy. It's the Arabs in a way. It's all non-Jews because we've been anti-Semitics are everywhere, and the non-Jews may be against us. But more specifically, we're surrounded by Arabs, and they're my enemy. I don't want to befriend them. I don't want to become their friends. I'm afraid of them. I want to fight them. I don't want to be their friend. So that's their other. It's the opposite. And who is the thou for the religious right? It's the left-wing Jew. Because we're all one people. We're all one nation. Even when the split was going on, the people who sounded more the sound of let's unite, let's be one people, let's remember that we're one people. It was people on the right, the religious people. We're saying, after all, we're all Jews. And there was one clip, and it didn't take me by surprise, but it took many people by surprise, that you had these two demonstrations and they clashed. And these two sweet religious girls were talking to two elderly women on the left wing demonstration. And the two religious girls said, well, whatever we disagree, we're all one people. And then the two elderly left-wing women says, no, we're not one people. And that's how it was pre-October 7th, or as we call it, that's how it was in Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the day before Simchat Torah. So that was like the October 6th. That was like the day before, and they said, I know this, like, I don't feel like we were part of one nation. That's how the left feels. But the right is constantly trying to reach out, because the right is more nationalistic, so he wants to have this nationalistic unity. Now the thing is this, just like the Baal Shem Tov was both, inside he was a leftist, but outside he was a rightist, and he was able to do both, then really what we should aspire to is we should want for everyone to be a zulat. Everyone should be a thou. No one should be objectified. No one should be othered. However, there is an order to things. And the way it's ordered is that when you have these two groups, each one with total opposite thou and other, you have to decide who you're going first with. And it's very clear, both in America and in Israel, that it has to start with concentric circles. You can't jump. That's impatient. It's unrealistic. It's utopian. It's a way for you to maybe transcend some guilt feelings that you have. You have to face those guilt feelings. Why do you have them? And you face it by confronting, I'm talking to the left-winger now, by confronting your other. You have to confront your other before the right wing has to confront his other, because it's closer to you. The closer other is the hardest other. It's the most important other to face. If I can talk to all the people in the world, but I can't talk to my wife, something is very, very, very wrong with my life. If I can talk to my wife, I'd have a hard time talking to other people. It's also not the perfect thing in the world, but it's better. It's a start. Because the one that's closer, it's the person closest to me that I have a hard time with. This is the real test. And if you're able to communicate with the one closer to you, if you're able to reconcile in America with the West itself, and with your own world, and with your neighbor, before you go to some, idealistic vision that you have of the non-white, of the African, of the brown person, the black person, this person, the Orient, whatever it is. These are abstractions that are serving some self-image that you have, that you're enlightened, that you're open. It's all self-image. You want to be really enlightened? Talk to your Republican neighbor. He's closer. He's right there next to you, and you're not listening to them. You're shedding your ears and eyes. And it's the same. Now, however, the right wing has to be challenged also. Because once they start talking, what's going to happen? So the left winger is going to say, you know what, Rabbi Menussi, you're right. I'm gonna open the left wing, in the Tel Aviv left winger is going to maybe start talking to his religious neighbor, or the right wing neighbor, or the settler that he met somewhere and he was against, and he would start talking to him and understanding him. But once they become friends, the left winger is going to challenge the right winger. He's going to tell him about, what about the Arabs? You don't care about them? You don't care about them dying in Palestine and in Gaza? You don't care about them at all? Yeah. What kind of Jew are you? What kind of... And then he would prevent the right winger from falling into the same dynamic which everyone is liable to fall into, which is this dynamic of polarization, of saying that just like the left winger is opposing my views, I'm going to be totally opposed to his views, but that's not what it should be. The model should be that the right is building a structure in which you need to contain the elements of truth of both the right and the left. And because the right is the one with the presumption to represent godliness and to represent God. That's the whole idea. He's representing religion and tradition. And he's representing the infinite. The infinite is the root of the left and the right. So if the right is all about making fun of the left, and much of what the right is doing is exactly that is very, very sad. It's very, very tragic. If you open a right-wing YouTube channel and all they're doing are just making fun of how the left are stupid and the left are bad and the left are this, and that's not what you're meant to do. And so this dynamic is bad on both sides. So the order is, and again, it's hard for each one of them at their stage. But if you're going back to the thou and the other, the first thou, the first circle that has to become a thou, is the one closer to you, and the right is right first. You have to go first with the right, but then you have to listen to the left, because the left is projecting the future for you. Generally, the right is past oriented, and the left is future oriented. The left is charting the course to the future. The fact that it's more universal, it's more egalitarian, it's more revolutionary. It wants every individual to represent it. All this is this is what the prophets are talking about. They're talking about everyone equally appreciating God and everyone having their place and no one feeling out of place. And they're talking about a revolution. And the left-wingers they're like coming from the future. The only problem is that they're impatient. They're trying to skip the close circle to the farther circle. But they get the far circle right. Absolutely right. That's where we should all be heading. So the left-wingers, they have a sense of the future. And every new thing that comes into the world, it comes in through the left. They're the harbingers of the future. And their only mistake, and they unfortunately repeatedly make this mistake, is that they're trying to rush us into this future in a way that skips over something very, very crucial. And it's exactly this gap that the right-wingers are coming into and saying, you can't jump over this. You can't ignore the border. You can't ignore your nation. You can't ignore your country. You can't ignore the institutions that you have. You can't ignore your tradition. You can't ignore your identity. You can't ignore the family. You can't ignore the gender. You can't ignore... And it's true. It's very true. You can't make this jump. But if you're able to start looking at all these dilemmas in a way of thinking, well, the right is right in the short term, and because it's thinking long term, it's more right in the short term because it's more sober and more realistic and it's more understanding of how the world works, and it brings you closer with your in-group loyalty, your country, your people, and you have to go through that. And then you can start addressing and empathize with the enemy and thinking about the other side and thinking about the world in general and thinking about the good of the world and how you can contribute to the world. And you have to think that. And that's what the left is saying. So basically, the impatient one has to learn patience because it has to learn you're right, but we'll get there. We're getting there, but not so fast. First, we have to be right-wingers, and then we can get there. And for the right, it's also, they have to come out of this self-righteous feeling that because we're right in the short run, we have nothing to learn from the left and nothing to get from the left. The left are all wrong. Everything they're saying is just nonsense. No, it isn't. There's a lot of heart in the left. There's a lot of prophetic vision and truth in the left, that what they're trying to get across. Okay, so they're doing it maybe in a crude way, in a short-sighted way. It happens. But listen to really what they're really saying. They want a tolerant society. They want society that everyone can be expressed. They want their heart to be connected. They want it to be something authentic. They don't want it to be something that's lectured and preached from some ideal that's coming from 1,000 years ago. They want it to be now. They want it to live. They want it to be creative. All the creativity and the art is on the left almost. They're living in the moment in a way that you should be jealous of. So this is one way, one example. Which is the big example. It can come across in so many ways. But one particular way of looking at how to integrate the right and the left, which is really what it would do is once you integrate it, again, like we saw on the axes, then suddenly a third axis would be like political centrism, but totally different from the centrism we know, because the people who call themselves centrists are neither here nor there, but the future centrism would be both here and there. They would really integrate the right and the left, and even the far right and the far left, into a new kind of centrism, which is what we want to aspire to. And then God would say, I feel at home in this world. Finally, this is what I've been waiting for. I was waiting for you to make a home for me, to build a home for me, in which both my right side of my brain and the left side of my brain can sit within this wide, spacious skull of a world that I built, and that cozy home that you built for me. This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much.